Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. So, welcome to the last of the Sunday afternoon talks for this Rains Retreat of 2024. And the theme for today is Beyond Right and Wrong. So I thought it would be a good way to finish things off for this year, to consider this aspect of teachings. And I'll offer a few reflections on this theme as we do every week, and then after a break for some refreshments, and there'll be opportunity for people to ask questions. So, in considering this this statement or this principle, beyond right and wrong, I thought there's two principal ways of approaching things. Both the sort of more intellectual, philosophical approach, and then also the more instinctual or the reactive approach of our own kind of ordinary, everyday mental habits. So in terms of the philosophical approach, beyond right and wrong, a number of phrases or statements immediately came to mind from the sort of European point of view. One of which was Friedrich Nietzsche. Back in the 19th century, he published a book called Beyond Good and Evil, a prelude to a philosophy of the future. And in that, he's talking about an approach to life or an understanding that is of very much his own take on things, but looking at morality outside of the sphere of religious formats. I think in a previous book of his called Thus Spake Zarathustra, I didn't check this, but I think he says, "Surely you have heard that God is dead." And that's quite a popular statement amongst people who are breaking free from the theistic point of view, and that kind of conditioning of the common standpoint and understanding of people in previous ages to sort of take a strong philosophical atheistic point of view was his idea, as I understand it. So that that kind of area on talking about morality as something that is relative and not an absolute sort of command from a creator deity. That was something of a new idea, or made a popular idea at that time. Also, earlier than Nietzsche, back in the times of William Shakespeare, one of the most quoted lines from Hamlet. Once again, frequently quote Hamlet, but one of the lines from Hamlet that is often quoted in this kind of same area, where Hamlet, where it is said, "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Please do take a seat. There's lots of empty cushions and mats. Do come forward. Don't be shy. So that's from Hamlet, and even earlier than that, in the Middle East, in the words of the great poet Rumi, the Sufi poet Rumi, one of the lines that's very regularly quoted from Rumi is, "Out beyond rightness and wrongness there is a field. I will meet you there." Out beyond rightness and wrongness there is a field. I will meet you there. So these kind of statements and philosophies being particularly sort of popular or interesting to people trying to shake free of the kind of perceived pressure of the biblical commandments, or a sense of religious authority telling you what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what is moral, what is immoral, and having a life governed by this kind of diktats from outside, and that sense of, well, it's up to us. We decide what's right, what's wrong. It doesn't have to be a commandment or something that's delivered from outside. It's relative. It's a moral relativism, as they say, and that can bring a certain amount of freedom or a sense of relief, but it's also somewhat dangerous. And certainly Nietzsche's philosophy was taken and used as a justification for a lot of very destructive and terrible actions. That kind of we decide what's moral and what's immoral. We decide what's good, and there's no outside authority that can tell us differently. So that kind of letting go of the ideas of right and wrong, or dismissing them, and the kind of using our own personal judgment has got a lot of danger attached to it, I would say, and a lot of very unskillful behaviours have come forth from that. Also, in more modern times, in the sort of freewheeling counterculture of the 1960s and 70s, quite a lot of spiritual teachers who would advocate this same kind of transcendent philosophy. There's no good, there's no bad. Nothing either good or bad. Only our thinking makes it so. But seeing it as a very kind of high-minded wisdom, transcending good and bad. That this is just for the mere moralities for the kind of uneducated, the spiritually ignorant population, and that say that idea of a non-dualistic approach, or a way of letting go of those customary or cultural standards of right and wrong, good and bad, taken as a sort of moral or spiritual high ground. And so people would quote teachers like Krishnamurti, or teachings from the Advaita Vedanta, non-dualistic teachings from the Vedic tradition, or from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition or Zen Buddhist tradition in particular. But to me it's kind of interesting, and I've spoken about this before at different times, where people sort of claim the kind of transcending the sort of ordinary, mundane, worldly moral values, but it's curious as how the behavior of such people often revolves around me having lots of enjoyable things, me having valuable possessions, me pursuing a lot of sense pleasure at other people's expense, and so that mentioning no names. But it is quite noticeable how many people who espouse that kind of very high-minded philosophy, they choose to act in ways that are quite indulgent, quite sort of based around their own sensuality, making excuses of, I've transcended all of that, I'm beyond all that, I'm not attached to any of this. It's just the play of the universe. So it's striking to me how often people can take that kind of high-minded position, like the beyond good and bad. Just this is merely the workings of the conditioned world. I have no attachment to any of this. And I was reflecting on this morning. I was reminded of a story of a friend of ours who's a Tibetan Lama who teaches in the Dzogchen tradition, which is very much a sort of non-dualistic approach to wisdom in the Tibetan tradition. And he was staying at the house of some very wealthy people in Northern California. Marin County is the county just across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco, and it's one of the wealthiest areas of the United States. And he was staying in a very, very posh house. And his host was claiming that, he He did have these nice and valuable things around him, these sort of Monet paintings on the wall, a couple of Picassos, and this house is worth $15 million or so, with a nice view over the bay and over the rolling hills, but not attached to it in any way. It's just I see it's just the play of forms. It's just the world of perception. So I wasn't there when this took place, but I heard from someone who was close by that Rinpoche, Tsoknyi Rinpoche was this Tibetan Lama's name. So he picked up this coffee pot and that was sitting on the table, and he started to tilt it. He said, "How much did this rug cost you?" It was like a Turkish carpet. He said, "About $36,000." And he starts to tilt the coffee pot, tilting it a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And the owner of the house is seeing how close the coffee is getting to the spout. He's like, all right. I'm attached. About to see a very large coffee stain on his $36,000 carpet. So that we can have that idea that we're beyond all that and unattached, but and we can be very clever and make good excuses and have all sorts of reasons, but so out beyond right and wrong, beyond good and bad, then I feel it's important to acknowledge, yes, that is my carpet. It costs a lot of money, and please don't pour coffee over it. And so that, but I wouldn't say it's always the case. There certainly have been great wise beings who similarly, I brought along a book of Luang Por Chah's teachings to demonstrate how he also talks about this same area, but yet it doesn't result in indulgent behavior or behavior that's sort of harmful and destructive to other people, but it's far more sort of compassionate and kindly. And I was also, please do come in if you're out in the lobby. There's no need to wait outside. In some of the stories of the Mahasiddhas, the great enlightened yogis of the Hindu tradition that also recognized within the Buddhist tradition in India, there was one. I forget the name of this particular meditator, this spiritual master, but he realized he was very attached to purity and to this sort of high moral standards. And as he developed wisdom and was sort of letting go of his attachments and his habits of identification, that he tested himself by just living on fish guts from the fish market. That's all he would eat, was the guts out of the fish that people would throw away to the cats and dogs in the market. And he thought, okay, I need to get over my attachment to delicious tastes and purity of food and all the kind of niceties that I've had in my life before this. So I'll train myself just to live on fish guts. So I thought, well, whether that actually happened historically or not, it's a pretty impressive standard that you want to test your non-attachment. Well, rather than testing your non-attachment to having fine, comfortable clothes and beautiful things around you and engaging in sexual indulgence or delicious foods and such like, just grovel around in the market, picking up fish guts and living on that as your nourishment for 10 or 15 years, and then if you can do that with equanimity, with an even mind, I would say, well, I don't think I would do that myself. But in terms of a principle, I thought that's more like testing your non-attachment rather than just having sort of comfortable or luxurious and pleasant things that you then claim to be unattached to. So this, I feel that when we talk about beyond right and wrong, letting go of right and wrong, there is a principle there that we find within the Buddhist teachings and great masters of our own tradition, like Luang Por Chah, Luang Pu Man, did speak about this area. But it's very much, it needs to be understood that it's not devoid of its connection to the the conditioned world, and that if we talk about letting go of right and wrong or transcending sort of mundane moral values or attachment to that, that it doesn't necessarily lead to kind of indulgent or harmful behaviors. Again, this is something that it can easily be misunderstood. And also talking with Tsoknyi Rinpoche, I did a number of events with him. I co-led a 10-day meditation retreat with him when I was living in America. And he said, yes, we do teach these very profound wisdom teachings, but you have to do 20 years of study of concentration practices. You have to do so many 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 mantra recitations. You have to be really, really pure in your moral conduct, and you have to have a really good understanding of karma before you'll be introduced to those Dzogchen teachings. And I thought, well, that kind of makes sense, because if there's a wrong understanding, a wrong grasping of those teachings, then it can lead to that unconsciously following self-centered or indulgent destructive behaviors, and having a really good set of excuses for it. So and so I would say, I was chatting with him about this and said, well, in the Theravada tradition we don't have such strict restraints, but when we talk about the teachings on not self, but it can be that people sort of misunderstand that or grasp the teachings on not self in an unhelpful way. That say, well, if all dhammas are not self, then who is there to receive the results of karma? Whoopee! So I can do quote unquote, I can do what I like, and there's no one here to get any negative results from it. Oh, that sounds good. So I say it's a very worldly and sort of foolish misunderstanding, a wrong grasping of the teachings. But there have been people around, and people who have advocated or tried to practice in that way, which is, I would say, very, very unfortunate, very sad misreading of the teachings, and not what the Buddha's teachings intended. So maybe to share some of the teachings from our own tradition, I thought I brought this book along, so I should read a little bit from it. This is the collected teachings of Ajahn Chah, and this is from a talk of his that's entitled "Still Flowing Water." If there is no long, there is no short. If there is no right, there can be no wrong. People these days study away, looking for good and evil, but that which is beyond good and evil, they know nothing of. All they know is the right and the wrong. I'm going to take only what's right. I don't want to know about the wrong. Why should I? If you try to take only what is right, in a short time it'll go wrong again. Right leads to wrong. People keep searching among the right and the wrong. They don't try to find that which is neither right nor wrong. They don't try to find that which is neither right nor wrong. They study about good and evil. They search for virtue, but they know nothing of that which is beyond good and evil. They study the long and the short, but that which is neither long nor short, they know nothing of. This knife has a blade, an edge, and a handle. Can you lift only the blade? Can you lift only the edge of the blade or the handle? The handle, the edge, and the blade are all parts of the same knife. When you pick up the knife, you pick up all three parts together. In the same way, if you pick up that which is good, the bad must follow. People search for goodness and try to throw away evil, but they don't study that which is neither good nor evil. If you don't study this, there can be no completion. If you pick up goodness, sorry, my eyes are getting all weepy here. Not through emotion, just through my dodgy eyes. If you pick up goodness, badness follows. If you pick up happiness, suffering follows. The practice of clinging to goodness and rejecting evil is the Dhamma of children. It's like a toy. Sure, it's all right. You can take just this much. But if you grab onto goodness, evil will follow. The end of this path is confused. It's not so good. Take a simple example. You have children. Now suppose you want to only love them and never experience hatred. This is the thinking of one who doesn't know human nature. If you hold on to love, hatred will follow. In the same way, people decide to study the Dhamma to develop wisdom, study good and evil as closely as possible. Now, having known good and evil, what do? They try to cling to the good, and evil follows. They didn't study that which is beyond good and evil. This is what you should study. I'm going to be like this, I'm going to be like that. But they never say, I'm not going to be anything at all, because there really isn't any I. This they don't study. All they want is goodness. If they attain goodness, they lose themselves in it. If they get too good, they'll start to go bad. And so people end up just swinging back and forth like this. In order to calm the mind and become aware of the perceiver of sense impressions, we must observe it. Follow the one who knows. Train the mind until it is pure. How pure should you make it? If it's really pure, the mind should be above both good and evil, above even purity. It's finished. That's when the practice is finished. Also, Venerable Ajahn Amaro, Luang Por Chah's teacher, in a long poem he wrote called The Ballad of Liberation from the Five Khandhas, he said, wanting what's good without stop, that's the cause of suffering. A strong fear of bad, that's like a poison to the mind. Attaching to good and bad, it's like a poison. So that what these teachings are pointing to is the habit of grasping and to say that quality of identification. I want what's good, I don't want what's bad, I should be good, I don't want to be bad. Letting go of that, but within Buddhist wisdom, I feel it's good to appreciate that that doesn't thereby unpick the laws of karma. Another poem close to the one that's from the lines from Hamlet, which comes from a Japanese poem, which I saw many years ago, which goes something like, there is nothing good or evil of itself, but people tend to weep when certain things are done. So that, I feel, is very helpful advice. So it's like, yes, there is nothing that is intrinsically beautiful or intrinsically ugly, intrinsically right or intrinsically wrong. But when action is taken which is cruel, which is destructive, which is indulgent, then there's going to be a painful consequence to that in the conditioned world. If something is done which is kind, which is generous, which is compassionate, then there's going to be a pleasant result. Again, in the conditioned world, but that will be the result. And so also I would say that's why within the Dzogchen tradition they have that someone won't be given those wisdom teachings until they've shown they really understand karma and its results in a clear way, a way that the teacher recognizes, okay, now you understand the principle that emptiness does not negate the workings of karma. That that's not how life operates. And so that I feel when we talk about this area, beyond good and bad, beyond right and wrong, that it's helpful to realize that within the Buddha's teaching we have the Lokuttara, the transcendent wisdom, that everything is empty, but they also have the mundane wisdom that there are the laws of cause and effect. Things affect each other on the conditioned level. So what we call the Sammuti Satya, the conventional truth, and the Paramatta Satya. So a number of these wisdom teachings, perhaps with good intention, people trying to relieve themselves of the sense of limitation and bondage or pressure and burdenedness of the conditioned, then they attach to the unconditioned. They just want to take just the transcendent view and to say that everything is empty, nothing matters, all dhammas are not self, and attach to that principle of the transcendent reality and kind of brush aside or ignore the conventional truth. at the other end of the scale, then we can attach to the conventional truth and say but there really is things that are good, there really are things that are bad, and they really, that can't be let go of, that can't be ignored, that can't be, you can't dismiss that. So attaching to the convention, or attaching to the samuti satcha, the conventional or worldly truth. So I feel one of the enormous strengths that we have in Buddha Dhamma is that there's an equal acknowledgement and respect for both the transcendent reality and the worldly reality. The paramatta satcha, the transcendent truth, and the samuti satcha, the conventional truth. That we have both Dhamma and Vinaya. In our training, there is the teachings, the Dhamma teachings of the ultimate nature of reality is unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed, timeless, not self. But then we have the Vinaya discipline for the monastic community, the precepts for the lay community, that very clearly say, this is wholesome to do, this is unwholesome to do. It's good to do this, it's not good to do that. So that I feel that's one of the great beauties and strengths of Buddha Dhamma, that the Buddha gave equal strength to both those. He didn't just teach Dhamma without the Vinaya, he didn't just teach Vinaya without Dhamma, but we have both together. And it's often been quoted how when Lumpur Sumedho was a young monk, one day Ajahn Chah said to him, "Sumedho, you must be confused." And he wasn't quite sure what was coming, but he thought, okay, Lumpur's going to deliver a teaching here. So you must be confused. He said, "Oh, why is that, Lumpur?" I said, "Well, the Dhamma's all about letting go, but the Vinaya's all about holding on. Isn't that confusing?" And as Lumpur Chah said that, he realized, yes, actually that is quite confusing. And then he thought that Lumpur was going to go into a kind of an extensive discourse to explain how that all operated. But all he said was, when you figure out how that works, you'll be fine. That was so it's a kind of a whole life training, it's something we have to learn within ourselves, how the transcendent teaching doesn't preempt the conventional teaching, and the conventional teaching doesn't preempt the transcendent teaching, but they work together. Another way that I like to talk about this is in the word that the Buddha used to refer to himself, the word Tathagata. And as I understand it, that you don't find that word found in other scriptures or other traditions or in Indian literature prior to the Buddha's time. It seems he coined that word to refer to his own being, his own nature. And in one of D.T. Suzuki's books, a great Japanese scholar and practitioner, he said, the word Tathagata is completely impossible to translate and to fully understand. And then he spends 14 pages trying to explain it. So the word Tathagata has got different elements. So the word tat, T-A-T-H, tat or tata, means thus or such. The word gata, like Buddhaṃ Saraṇaṃ Gacchāmi, means to go. Agata means to come. And so the word Tathagata can either mean gone to suchness or arrived at suchness. Either completely present or completely gone. And the Buddha was very fond of word plays and double meanings. So my pet theory is that rather than, and there have been arguments and discussions for many centuries about, well, did he really mean that the Buddha principle is completely transcendent or it's absolutely present, immanent? And discussions, arguments have gone on. What did the Buddha really mean with respect to that? But my feeling is that he deliberately meant it to be have a double meaning, to be ambiguous, both completely present, fully attuned to the material world, the experiential field of sight, sound, smell, taste and touch, and at the same time completely transcendent, that the one doesn't exclude or belie the other. It was a deliberate double meaning, and I think that would be very characteristic of the Buddha's style of using language. So, right there in the word he used to refer to himself, there's both the respect for the samuti satcha, the conventional, conditioned realm, and there's the respect for the unconditioned, the paramatta satcha, the transcendent truth. So exploring this area, then and reflecting on Luang Por Chah's teachings, Luang Pu Man, and what was saying about the Buddha's style, so beyond right and wrong, is say letting go of the idea of those conventional standards as something to be identified with, or to be grasped, or to be owned by a person. But when the insight into not self is developed, when the path is cultivated free of self-view, free of conceit, then the natural result of that, I wouldn't say we have to go out and live on fish guts from the from the fish market to transcend our attachments to convention, but rather as that insight into not self is actualized, then rather than that transcendent vision resulting in more indulgent behavior or selfish or destructive behavior, it results in a greater refinement, a greater sense of what will not cause other beings to weep. I was quoting that Japanese poem where there's nothing good or evil of itself, but people tend to weep when certain things are done. So therefore, there is nothing good or evil of itself. So be very careful about what we say, what we do, that might cause other beings to suffer, to weep. Because even if we have a transcendent and unattached perspective, other beings that our lives interact with do not have that same kind of perspective. That perhaps they do not have that same kind of transcendent wisdom, and that pain feels very real to them. Being taken advantage of, or being oppressed, or being mistreated is genuinely painful and difficult, and causes the tears to flow. One of the teachings I like to reflect on in this respect is a couple of dialogues that the Buddha had with two different wanderers, called, and there is two suttas side by side in the Book of the Nines, in the Numerical Discourses, and the Buddha's describing the nature of an arahant, the mind of an arahant, to these two different wanderers. One is called Suttava, the other is called Sajja. And he describes how, so for an arahant, for an enlightened being, they are incapable of deliberately taking life. Like, it's impossible for them. They can't move towards deliberately taking the life of another being. They're not following a rule. It's just the hand cannot move to harm another being. They can't steal anything. They can't take anything that's not given to them, or that is not obviously theirs. They can't. The hand won't move to take something if they know this belongs to someone else. This is not mine. This hasn't been given. The hand can't go to pick it up. The tongue can't form a lie. The mind can't form an untruth and then turn it into speech. It's impossible to tell a lie. Or engaging in sexual activity. There's no inclination to relate to another being in a sexual way. That's just switched off. It's not there. It's absent. So I feel that's really helpful to say appreciate that in a way the arahants are not following rules. They're not keeping precepts. It's the natural disposition of the heart, free of greed, hatred, and delusion. It can't deliberately take life. It can't deliberately steal. It can't lie. It can't take advantage of others. As the other parts of those teachings are also interesting in their own right, they said that an arahant cannot lay up a store of things for the next day, so for the future. So they don't think about sort of keeping a stash just in case of for food or things that will be making them comfortable or safe or secure. But the awake mind tends to trust and rely on what's present and not worry too much about the future. And there are other aspects to it as well, but I feel particularly those first four of the precepts, as you have in the 8 precepts, that's particularly significant. That as the mind wakes up, as it becomes more and more fully liberated, then the result of that is extraordinary care in terms of the lives of other beings, the property of other beings, the sense of ownership, not relating to other beings in a sexual way, not moving towards any kind of deceit or deception to pursue self-advantage. Just the mind can't go in that direction. So in terms of beyond right and wrong, I feel those are very helpful teachings to relate to. When people have read things like Nietzsche or the kind of the wisdom teachings of certain prominent spiritual teachers that encourage a kind of letting go of the moral standards that the society holds on to or takes very dear, that kind of recognition of that there are no rules. Do what thou wilt. That was, I think, the motto of Aleister Crowley's his community when he set up as a famously influential writer and teacher back in the late 19th, early 20th century, that you do what thou wilt, do whatever you wish, that shall be the whole of the law. So that resulted in a lot of destructive and confusing behavior. So I feel that that's, in a sense, trying to break free of those constraints of a moralistic society, but unconsciously being guided by the habits of greed, hatred, and delusion. If the greed, hatred, and delusion isn't there, then those the standards of society can be let go of, because your own natural disposition is to be extremely careful, extremely respectful for the feelings and perceptions, the attitudes of all the other beings around you. That you can't see that your feelings or your life is more important than an ant or a snail in your garden, or let alone your next door neighbor or the other people that you share your life with. How could your preferences and your wishes be more important than somebody else's? How could your life be more important than these other beings? And that's a natural and a felt sense that is there in our heart. So I feel that this area is really good to contemplate, and those teachings, that the result of letting go, the result of transcendent wisdom, from the Buddhist perspective, is extraordinary care and a very conscious appreciation of the laws of cause and effect, the law of karma and vipaka, of action and its results. There isn't an attachment to them or an identification with them, but it's realizing this is how nature works. This is how life operates. And therefore, there's an intuitive sense of being extremely careful. So the other approach I was mentioning, the sort of more instinctual approach to right and wrong, there's a little booklet, one of the ones I did on the 4 Brahma Viharas, and the first one about loving kindness, about metta, is called I'm Right, You're Wrong. So that also sprang to mind, and seeing the theme for today, that rather than a philosophical position, that you're reading Nietzsche or Hamlet or Rumi, or kind of the high-minded philosophical position, much more of an instinctual, reactive habit of like, I am more important than you. This is my stuff, and you back off. And this is my opinion, and I'm right. And if you think differently, you are wrong. And so that this is, rather than coming from a high-minded philosophy in life, many of us are rather sort of guided by these more basic, habitual, reactive habits. If I like it, it's good. If I don't like it, it's bad. If I have an opinion, it's true. It's not an opinion; it's a fact. And if you think differently, you're wrong. And that is often where we come from. And so I feel that in terms of our practice and dealing with those feelings of rightness and wrongness, and attaching to our own beliefs and opinions, then the way of working with it is not just looking at our sort of philosophical positions, but looking at our attitude, that sense of judgment that we make that lack of loving kindness or lack of empathy with others. So the reason why I chose that title for that little booklet about loving kindness, I thought that's the kind of the best way of expressing having no kindness, or that no acceptance for where others are at. And that if we live in that way, I'm right, you're wrong, then we live in a world of contention, a conflict, that we're always surrounded by wrongness, and the mind moves towards complaining and criticizing, blaming. So that I do feel we might not want to be hard-hearted or have that lack of appreciation, not notice where it comes from. But it's very sad when this is the way that we live, that we find ourselves criticizing, blaming others. Whenever we feel unhappy, it's somebody else's fault. It's the neighbor's fault, or the government's fault, or the other driver's fault, or our family member, our sister, our brother, our parent, our child. It's their fault. I'm unhappy. It's because of you. If you were different, I would be happy. So you should change. I'm not reading anybody's mind. This is. How did he know that? But this is just how we easily operate. And so to notice that kind of the mind attaching to rightness and wrongness, and always feeling that we've got to be right, and we're blaming others or criticizing others, that the most helpful way to work with that is the cultivation of loving kindness, of metta, of open-heartedness. Many years ago, I was before we opened up Amaravati Monastery, I would be living in San Francisco. I'd go and stay for 3 or 4 months every year. The group there, Sangapala, would rent a flat, and I would stay there sometimes with another monk or two, and be there for 3 or 4 months, and then come back here to Amaravati. And there was a number of people who used to regularly come along to the Buddhist group in San Francisco, and one of the people was very very committed, used to come along to many of the evening gatherings and talks and so forth, that she always seemed to be having kind of great difficulties in her life, and she had injuries from having been knocked off her bicycle, or she was having conflicts with her family or with her neighbors, and I felt very sorry for her. I thought, wow, her life is so difficult. She has so many struggles and obstructions and problems in her world, and so that she, because I was often hearing the latest difficulties that she was encountering, and so one day she invited me to her home to have a meal offering there. And I'm not trying to put her down or blame her, but it was really indicative, because as we were sitting there, I was out in the little patio area. I was sitting in the shade of the building, and then she mentioned, I'm suing my neighbors because they won't let me cut the branches of their tree, which is shading my plants. And the plants that she had, they were already in pots. They weren't planted in the ground. They were pot plants along that particular side of the garden. And I said, so you've got a court case against them because they won't let you trim the branches? She said, yes, I'm taking them to court. I said, well, why don't you just move the plants to the other side of the patio? Because I want them there. And she absolutely meant it. I'm not trying to belittle her or make fun of her, but her face was absolutely sincere. No, I want them there. They should be there. And I felt, this is why, one of the reasons why this person, out of good intention, is having one clash or one conflict, one difficulty after another, that in that person's mind they couldn't see that it was totally reasonable to move the plants to the other side of the garden, and it would be out of the shade of the leaves on the tree. But no, I want the plants to be there, so they should remove their branch. They should let me take the branch off the tree. So I felt great compassion, and that and for that person, it was absolutely clear. No, that they should let me chop that branch off, and they should, and they're wrong to not let me do that. And right there I can see, wow, this is what we do. We get fixed on our own sense of rightness, and we attach to that, and we can make reasons for it, but we're closing ourselves off to the others who are involved, let alone the tree that probably wouldn't want to lose its branch. But so in terms of that kind of habit of mind, I'm right, you're wrong, if I think it, it's true, then to cultivate the quality of loving kindness. And as Luang Por Sumedho would often emphasize, loving kindness doesn't mean to try to make ourselves like everything. Loving is not the same as liking. So that if you have a chronic headache, you have migraines, every so often, and your head is ablaze with pain for days on end. You can't make yourself like that, but you can find a quality of acceptance. Whether I like it or not, here it is. If you have somebody that in your family who's causes you a great deal of stress and difficulty, and that there's one endless trouble or difficulty after another, you can't make yourself like that, but you can recognize, well, here it is. This is the way it is. So I feel that's very helpful to understand that even though often the word loving is there in the translation for metta, your loving kindness, that love doesn't mean to like. It's an open-heartedness. So we can love our own deranged thoughts. we can love our own angry impulses, our jealous or selfish or lazy impulses. We can love them, not pretending that we like them, or that our anger or our jealousy, our laziness is beautiful and delightful, but rather, here it is, as a mental habit of feeling angry or feeling jealous or feeling lazy, just to use those as an example. It doesn't mean that we're affirming it or saying that it's good and wonderful, but here it is. So that that quality of acceptance, it doesn't mean approval, it doesn't mean trying to like the unlikable, but simply this is the way things are, this is how it is. And that when there is that attitude of loving kindness, I like to call it a radical acceptance. Again, it's not approving, but saying whether I like it or not. There is this experience, this injury or this illness or this difficult relationship or this oppressive situation. Here it is. But it doesn't mean that we are passive. Like when my eyes were getting weepy, I reached for a tissue and wiped my eyes to stop myself, my eyes dripping, so I could actually read the book. So the acceptance doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean being numb, or as we would say, being a doormat. But rather, based upon that acceptance, there's a realism. Here it is, whether I like it or not, this is the way things are. So, again, we can misinterpret that as therefore do nothing, or therefore shut down, or therefore just be with it. And when we do that, or we have that kind of attitude, we're switching off our natural responsivity, if that makes sense. So that just practicing non-attachment or acceptance, that it doesn't mean being passive, it doesn't mean not making choices, it doesn't mean not taking action. It means that there's an attunement to the time, the place, the situation, and if it's appropriate to reach for some tissues, you reach for some tissues. If it's appropriate to speak to your local MP, then you go and find your MP and talk to them. If something needs to be done, then, or that some action can be taken, words can be said that help to move things to a more peaceful, pleasant, benevolent situation for yourself and others, let that action be taken. But then that action, the intention and the effort are based on mindfulness and wisdom, not on self-view, or I should, I must, or they shouldn't be that way, I'm going to bring them down, or I've got to straighten that person out, or I shouldn't be this way, I should be another way. So that when there is a genuine loving kindness, and that's based on an attunement to the time, the place, the situation. That acceptance, also, part of what you're accepting is your capacity to act. You're accepting the ability to say something or do something, to take action, to help a situation. So I kind of stress this because sometimes when we talk about non-attachment or acceptance, then it can be read as a sort of just freeze yourself and just cultivate numbness. It doesn't mean that at all. So that, again, going back to the Buddha's life as an example, so he was supremely unattached. He had let go of the world completely. He was embodying transcendent wisdom to the degree that no other being had done since the previous Buddha. But then the result of having completely let go of any identification or attachment to the world was to spend 45 years walking around Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, northeast India, barefoot most of the time, living on alms food and being extremely diligent and creative in establishing the teaching, the community of nuns and monks and the lay students. So that non-attachment resulted in an extraordinary, effective, creative presence in the world that we're the inheritors of 2,600 years later. So supreme non-attachment did not mean passivity, didn't mean inaction or indifference at all, but it means action based on mindfulness and wisdom, not on self-view or conceit. And so I feel that when we speak about beyond right and wrong, or letting go of right and wrong, it's to do with letting go of that self-centered grasping, letting go of that I should, I must, or this is an absolute, that I'm following a command or an obligation. That the beyondness what is to do with letting go of grasping, letting go of attachment. And again, as Luang Por Chah said, letting go is not about throwing away. He said many times, I don't have the reference marked in this book, but he would say that when we pick something up because we need it, so my glasses, okay, you put your glasses on, take them off, put them down. If you're grasping them, I'm not going to let go of my glasses, these are my glasses and no one's going to take them away from me, then there's grasping, there's tension, there's agitation. It's ridiculous. But if you pick them up, hold them, and put them down when you no longer need them, there's no harm in that, and they can be a useful tool to read with nowadays. I need glasses to read the print of a book. So he would make a clear distinction between grasping and holding, and that to function effectively, skillfully in the world, then learning to hold and pick things up, our duties, our responsibilities, our relationships, our work, pick it up, hold it as we need to, then put it down when we don't need to, when it's time to stop working, or we finished what we're doing or what we're saying, or the particular involvement. So that I feel, in terms of contemplating this theme of sort of beyond right and wrong, that it's not a matter of discarding or never relating to rightness and wrongness, otherwise trying to drive, saying there's no right or wrong side of the road, it's all just the road. You'll get yourself a ticket very quickly, and probably your license taken away. Well, in this country, the correct side of the road to drive on is the left. If you're in France or on the continent, then it's the right. So there are the conventions, but if we are able to use the conventions without attachment, without identification, then they can be very helpful, skillful means. If you get into an argument with the police officer about there's no right or wrong, officer, that they'll just say, get out of the car, give me your license, and you're going to be walking home or catching the bus. So that skillful use of convention, and I feel that's again what we've inherited in Buddha Dhamma, is there is a recognition of the laws of cause and effect. There's the standards of convention. So we appreciate karma and its results, the laws of cause and effect. This is how nature works. People tend to weep when certain things are done. People smile when other things are done. So that there's nothing ultimately so pure or perfect in that, but on the level of convention, the level of our lived world, our lived lives, then that's not something to be ignored. And I feel this is a wonderful, beautiful inheritance that we have from the Lord Buddha, that this is, both the transcendent wisdom that can help free the heart from all limitation and any kind of sense of burden or difficulty, but then also to help us to live harmoniously and in tune with this body of ours, with the people that we share our life with the living world that we're a part of, and that we're not dismissing the world of convention and material forms, and we're not identifying with it or grasping, but we're learning to hold our life in a skillful way, holding without grasping. We're not rejecting it or dismissing it or saying it doesn't matter, and we're not grasping it and identifying with it and taking it to be who and what we are, but what we have embodied in the Buddha's life, and that principle of the Tathagata, completely present, immanent, completely transcendent, completely gone, gone to suchness, arrived at suchness. That's the principle that we have presented to us in Buddha's teaching, and it's a great opportunity that we all have. So I'll leave these words for consideration today. If people have any questions, and we have a couple of microphones here, please use those so that everyone can hear the question. You'll need to push the little slider up on the side.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Ajahn. My question is around the precepts. So we, as lay practitioners, we have the 5 precepts. And I've been thinking about, obviously, they're a great aid, not only to myself, in terms of living a mindful life and cultivating skillful means, and I'm sure the same for many other folk. But I was also thinking about what your thoughts are in terms of if someone, i.e. a lay practitioner, was to practice the 8 precepts on a daily basis. And I suppose whether that would be a worthwhile thing to do. I mean, in some ways, the additional 3 precepts is, quite challenging in an everyday lay life with a family and work, responsibilities, etc., compared to following the 8 precepts, say, when you're staying at the monastery. But I just wonder what your thoughts are and your experiences of maybe meeting folk that have made that commitment and the potential benefit that you've seen it have in their life in terms of the practice.
Yeah, good question. Funnily enough, at the Amaravati Lay Buddhist Association 30th anniversary event yesterday, that a similar question came up during the day. So I would say it depends on your living situation to some degree. So if you're living by yourself, you don't have a family you have to connect with, or they've got other routines, or what your working life is, then it can vary in the impact that has. So, for example, if you're working independently, and if you don't have a family that you're living close to, then it's quite easy to live on the 8 precepts. You don't have to mesh with anybody else's life and routines. But if you've got children that you're raising, or a partner that is not interested in missing supper every day, then that kind of negotiation, or how that fits in with the people that you're living with and your family, is very, very definitely a consideration. Also, the working life. What is expected? Someone was asking yesterday how they're a school teacher, and so when they want to keep the 8 precepts on the moon days, and that's a working day, is it okay for them to wear some makeup or to have some because that's kind of expected to have in terms of presentability, quote unquote, in the workplace, and so the response I gave yesterday, and I would say that applies, is that the precepts they're sikkhapada. They're a process of training. Sikha is to train. The Thai word to study is siksa, and that comes from the Pali word sikha. So it's a way of studying. It's a way of training. So it's not an absolute, thou shalt. And by following that pattern, it's an intrinsic good, but rather it's a way of training. So doing the best you can in the living situation that you have without causing sort of daily grief to your partner, your children, the people that you're living with, and so on. That will be part of the training. Okay, how can I use this as a standard for simplicity, for making life easeful, but yet respecting the living situation that I'm in. So, for example, someone who was a monk in this community for many years, he kept the 8 precepts as a layman before coming into the monastery for about 8 years while he was working in London. And he had children he was raising, and he was married, but he chose to live on the 8 precepts. He had the permission of his wife she gave her approval. But then sometimes when he was in the workplace, there was some kind of project on in the work that he was doing, and that everyone in the office, he was a photo retoucher, he worked in an art studio. If everyone's working on a project, and there's no way that, anyone can stop for lunch at 12 o'clock, that you had to sort of go to it, and then, okay, everyone can have a break, and it's already 3 PM. So he would, and he asked about that during the time, said, is it okay to have a kind of adapted 8 precepts? Because once in a while, just with the flow of the workplace, I have to just have lunch with everyone else, and it's halfway through, more than halfway through the day. Is that okay? And I say, well, the training is for you. The precepts are for you. It's not like you're serving an external object or force. They're there for your own training, so that it's a standard. You're respecting the standard, but because of the circumstance of your working life and your responsibilities, then it kind of demands that that's adjusted for that particular day, for that particular situation. So personally, I feel that's quite all right. The purpose of it is for you, for your spiritual training, your spiritual benefit. And whether you're being sincere or whether you're being casual. Whether you're taking it seriously and doing the best you can, or whether you're just sort of fudging things for convenience or just for preference. And so then, if we hold it in that way, then even when we break a precept and it wasn't on a very good basis, so it was really just laziness or indulgence, then we know that, okay, that was poorly done, okay, and what's the result of having acted in that way? So again, rather than thinking I'm a bad, terrible person because I broke that precept, but rather, okay, that action was followed, here's the result. Ow. Okay, that's how it works. So that you're using it as a form of training. You're trying to keep the precepts and do your best with them, but you're learning from whether things go well or things go poorly, and whether you make skillful choices or unskillful choices. So that the one of the principles that you find expressed over and over again in the Vinaya texts, the Buddha says to recognize a transgression as such and to endeavor to do better in the future. This is called development in this Dhamma and discipline. So it doesn't mean never making any mistakes or never getting anything wrong, but recognizing, yeah, that was poorly said, that was poorly done, that was that was lazy or self-centered. Okay, and the result is painful. Okay, so learn from that, use that, and then let that inform our actions into the future.
Just one thing. I understand for everyone the practicalities will be different, but I guess my question is more centered around the usefulness. So, for example, personally, I see that there would be benefit in following 8 versus 5 precepts, but I'm interested in how you see the usefulness of following 8 versus 5 precepts, and whether it's from your experience or your wisdom or understanding, whether it is worthwhile of aspiring to 8 precepts in lay life rather than the normal 5.
Well, I can't really speak from personal experience because I never tried to live as a Buddhist layperson. My introduction to Buddhism was walking into a monastery, so I never actually tried to live a Buddhist lay life.
No, but
So
I mean
so I don't have personal experience, but the way the Buddha talked about the 8 precepts was if a layperson, if they undertake this discipline, then they will be living as the arahants do, and that'll be for their long-lasting benefit and happiness. So it's as simple as you can get for a human life. So you're making it as simple and uncomplicated as it's possible to do, really. And so I would say that's my experience of coming into the monastery and living that way. It was great. This is ideal, and it's very joyful to embody that kind of simplicity. So from that extent, but I can't say I ever tried to keep any precepts as a layperson. So I'm a kind of fraud when I'm giving advice to lay people, really. So any other questions? Yes. Oh, maybe. If you can push the slider up towards the...
Hello?
Yes.
I have 2 brief questions on semantics, if that's okay.
On what?
On semantics, on the meanings of a couple of the words that we used. You mentioned, to paraphrase you, loving one's own greed and anger doesn't mean to like it, but rather to accept it. So my question is there a difference between acceptance and love, or are the 2 synonymous? And if they are synonymous, then what's the benefit of using the term love, which seems to have this confusing undercurrent of liking something? And very briefly, my second similar question is, you mentioned, so regarding good and evil, you mentioned towards the end a sort of practice of non-grasping of the concept of good and evil. But towards the first half, you were speaking of non-attachment. Is there a difference between non-grasping and non-attachment, or are they synonymous? Thank you.
The word love in this context, so in metta, loving kindness, is not intended to imply liking, and that's a point Luang Por Sumedho has made repeatedly from way back when. It's complicated because the general English usage of the word love is used to mean I like. I love this weather. I love this country. I like it. So that metta in that respect is, and why we use a term like acceptance, is because it's indicating a quality of acknowledgement, radical acceptance in that sense of open-heartedness in relationship to a person or a mind state or a quality that's independent of liking, so that loving and liking will be very, very different, so that it's got that caveat on the use of the word love in this Buddhist context. Then the other one, I would say, attachment and grasping generally are used synonymously. The Pali word is upadana. So grasping and attachment, or anupadana, not grasping, non-attachment. So they are pretty much synonymous. I would say most Buddhist people teaching Buddhist principles would use those words interchangeably. Okay, there was a question, Julie, yeah. If you can pass the microphone along.
Now? Yes. So I had a question because I've been dealing with this question for quite a while. Because how would you approach a problem of moral dilemma? And I'm talking about a specific dilemma because I'm talking about hunting. I have a friend of mine who's a very old friend, and he recently started to hunt as a practice. And we had a lot of discussion about that. For me, it's very hard because I'm someone, I wouldn't even kill a mosquito if it bites me. But he goes out there and kills deer almost every day. And his approach to it is that our humanity has killed and put the ecosystem under so much sufferance that by now there's so much deer, and if we wouldn't hunt them, they would eat all the little trees and the whole ecosystem would just collapse. So that's why we need hunting. And I have accepted his response to it, but I still don't like it. And I know that might be an answer to it, but I would still like to hear your opinion on it.
Just wait for the phone to stop. Correct. So, growing up, I was a member of the British Field Sports Society, which is the hunting, and that was I grew up in the countryside and went fox hunting. Fortunately, the hunt that I belonged to, the Ashford Valley hunt, was extremely incompetent. So I was never on a hunt when they actually caught a fox. So I count that as a great karmic good fortune. But that was part of the world I grew up in. But then as I got to be a teenager and started to think about what I was doing and why I was doing it, then I sort of moved radically away from all of that. People create rationalizations of that nature, but it's not an accident that the Buddha placed panatipata viramani as the first precept, that considerations of the ecosystem being one thing, that the more human beings that refrain from killing other creatures, then the better that is in terms of the Buddhist understanding, and particularly as I was saying during the talk, how could my life be more important than the deer's? That what right do I have to choose to end your life? In the absolute scheme of things, why is my life more important than yours? And so that if one really allows the heart to embody that quality of compassion and empathy, then it's kind of impossible to think to feel that the life of any other being is less important than yours. And so that kind of profound respect for life isn't coming from a theory. It's not from a kind of an absolute commandment, but just from an empathy, an appreciation that all beings love life and fear death, and that putting yourself in the position of the hunted. It doesn't take very long to realize, I wouldn't want that, and that the kind of reasoning or excuses that people give. And as I said, I grew up in that world. So that. When you really look at it and feel your way into that with an open heart, it can't really be supported, I would say. People make their own choices, and to then say, I would say, if it's a close friend, then considering how you can express your view, or to say, communicate how things seem for you, that's up to you to decide, to figure out. But I would say that those kind of arguments, they might be well intended, but I would say that the very fact that the Buddha placed not killing as the first precept of any breathing thing, panatipata means any breathing being, that's not an accident. That's kind of precept number one, and that fundamental respect for life. And so that I feel is people have to come to that for their from their own experience, but oftentimes putting yourself in the position of the hunted or if you really appreciate. Or I mean, I know one of the long-time friends of the Sangha, close student of Luang Por Sumedho, he was very dedicated as an angler, fishing. Yeah, he used to spend a lot of time fishing. And then as he started to practice meditation, he began to realize that even though he would catch a fish and then release it, that fish did not want to be out of the water. That fish was not happy having a hook put through its mouth and dragged out into the air. You couldn't pretend that it was anything other than terror and misery for that struggling being. And he just, after a time, he couldn't do it. Ajahn Sujito tells an interesting story. With his dad used to take him fishing when he was a young boy, and he would just dangle the hook in the water, but with nothing on it. So sit next to his dad. He liked sitting next to his dad on the riverbank, but he would kind of have an empty hook so that no fish would ever bite it. So he could be with his dad and spend time together, but he wasn't going to harm any fish in the process. So I hope that's helpful. But the ways that we talk to our friends, and we can create. Sometimes, if we get too sort of ardent or too aggressive, we grasp our own non-violence too intensively, then the result can be the opposite. That person is even more determined to go out and kill more animals because my friend is giving me a bad time. I'll show her. I'm not. I'm not pretending to read the mind of your friend, but that kind of thing does happen. I know many years ago, one of the dedicated students from here that went along to a Dhamma talk in London, and the teacher gave a very, very ardent discourse on vegetarianism, but it had such a negative effect on this particular person. He said, I wouldn't normally do this, so I went straight to a hamburger joint. I felt myself compelled to go and eat a hamburger because I was so annoyed at being sort of preached at. So we need to be careful, skillful, and how we communicate, and to really get our own perspective across in a skillful way, because we can. Just like grasping goodness, we create badness. I'm so determined to make you see what's good that you can unfortunately create its opposite. So I think that's some of the things that Luang Por Chah and Luang Por Man were referring to there. So tread carefully as you put your message across. Oh yes, Ursula, if you can wait for the microphone, please.
I have a question regarding Tathagata, the word, and what it means. Thus gone, thus come, and thus gone. Isn't that two sides of the same thing?
Short answer, yes. But I feel, again, second guessing the Buddha is not a very good idea, but I seem to do it quite often. That it's a way of describing that mixture of qualities that on one level can seem to be contradictory, but are complementary, and that they that's a way of expressing that Buddha principle. And another way that I like to think of it is If you've got two working eyes, the binocular vision is what enables us to see in 3 dimensions. If we have, one eye sees the conditioned, one eye sees the unconditioned. With both eyes, then we have a 3D perspective. But if it's just one eye saying everything is empty or everything is everything is real, then the binocular vision is a way of helping things to be seen in a complete way. It can be to our habits of dualistic thinking. Well, it's either this or that. It's got to be one or the other. But I would say that's the narrowness of our thinking or our language that is what's being shown there, and it's that principle of the Tathagata is demonstrating something more of more dimensions than that. So please, any other questions? This is the last Sunday talk I'll be doing until 2026, so take advantage, if you wish.
Ajahn Amaro, thank you very much for a very thought-provoking talk earlier. I've got 2 questions, but I will go for one because maybe other people have questions as well. I think my question is about meditation, and I wonder what can be the decision process behind deciding on a meditation method. So whether particular meditation methods are more suited to certain personality types, and also, when to keep going with a particular meditation method and when to change course and try something new.
What comes to mind is a conversation that Luang Por Chah had with a Western visitor to Wat Pah Pong many years ago. And this person had a series of 3 questions that he was going around Southeast Asia and India asking various different meditation teachers. And it was, why do you meditate, how do you meditate, and what's the result of your meditation? And then eventually Luang Por Chah said, well, I want to ask you 3 questions in return. Why do you eat? What do you eat? And what's the result of you having eaten? And this person, at first, they were sort of insulted. Like, what do you mean? We're talking about meditation, not eating. But I'd say it's very comparable. And so that just as what you choose to eat, how hungry are you? What kind of foods are beneficial for your system? Yeah, what is really nutritious and helpful? And then if you've eaten that particular food, then what's the result of it? Okay, I really like that, but what effect does it have? Does it leave me hungry half an hour later, or does it give me a sugar rush and then I'm kind of scattered and frazzled, or does it help me to feel at ease and content, comfortable? What's the result? What's the effect of that? So with respect to meditation, that looking and saying, well, what's needed, what's useful, where are the areas that seem to need to be developed? So if you feel that you lack empathy, or you find yourself very uncaring or distant from other beings, or there's something in you that sort of shuts down, say, okay, well, loving kindness meditation might be a good idea, because I feel I very easily push things away and just shut down and shut people out or shut mind states out. I've got a very good door I can close. So maybe loving kindness meditation would be useful, or if there's a recognition, my mind is chattering away, a lot of distracted thoughts, a lot of lack of focus. So maybe some kind of concentration practice, like mindfulness of breathing. Or that, well, I've tried mindfulness of breathing, but my mind is really restless. It just doesn't stay with a single, simple object. So maybe instead I could use body sweeping, just move the attention through the body and use the sensations of the different parts of the body as a focal point. So there's an attention, but there's a bit of variety. It's like a bigger paddock for my restless horse to roam around in. If it's given too small a paddock, it just kicks the fence down and runs away. But give it a bit more room to play in. So that sense of assessing what's useful, what's interesting, what seems to be nutritious spiritually, and then trying it out and seeing what the results are. And that, because sometimes a particular practice, it might, well, that sounds like really good, and when I read about that or hear about that, the results sound great. Well, that sounds appealing, so I'll do that. But then when you try it in your own life, it's like what the results are don't match what you heard in the Dhamma talk or in the book. It's like, well, that didn't go like I was expecting. I've been trying this and it's not having that same result. So, okay, maybe try something else. So it's not just a matter of choosing a method and applying it, but looking at the results. So that's called vimamsa in Pali, that looking at the results of the choices that we've made. And so then when you apply something and then with reviewing that, looking at the results, realizing, oh, okay, well that was hard work, but the result of that's really good, really beneficial. Okay, so that's takes a lot of effort, or there's hard work to do, but yeah, it's really worthwhile. That's a good result. So just being guided, particularly by your own experience of what the results are. So when we picking up meditation practices, there's never a guarantee of what the result's going to be or how it's going to work for an individual. And so I do feel that experimental approach is sensible also. Or maybe I can combine loving kindness and mindfulness of breathing together. Is that legal? Can I do that? Well, yeah, who says you can't? Try it out and see whether it works. Like the first time that the young bhikkhu Sumedho, he'd only been a monk for about 6 months when Ajahn Sumedho met Lumpur Cha. And Ajahn Chah asked him, what kind of meditation have you been doing? And the practice that he'd been using mostly was a kind of inquiry, a koan practice he learned from a Chinese meditation master. There's books of these Dhamma talks of Master Shu Yun translated into English, from talks he'd given on a retreat in the early 50s. And it explained this practice in quite some detail, and he'd been doing it as a layman. Then when he came into the monastery, he carried on using this inquiry into the question, who am I? And so Ajahn Chah asked him, what kind of practice have you been doing? And through a translator, he explained this investigation of the question, the Gung An, who am I? And he thought, as he was saying that, he's just going to tell me I shouldn't do that, I should do his method instead. But to his surprise, Ajahn Chah said, so what are the results? Do you find good results from that? And he said, oh yes, that's great. I really find it beneficial. And to his amazement, Ajahn Chah just said, okay, carry on doing that. And then sometime later, a few months later, when he'd learned a bit more Thai language and he was talking with Lumpur Cha, he said, when I told you about that practice I was doing about investigating the question, who am I? Had you ever heard of that before? He said, no. And he said, and they said, but you were happy for me to carry on using it. I said, yeah, well, you said it had good results, so who am I to say it doesn't? And particularly in that era, in the 60s, there was very often the case of different monasteries, like this is the method of the Wat Pak Nam method, or the Wat Saket method, or the Ajahn Mahabua method, and so that people would follow that particular single method that the Ajahn taught in that particular monastery. And so that was the environment that the young Ajahn Sumedho had grown up with. So he was really surprised that Ajahn Chah was so flexible. But he went by, well, what's the result? Even though he'd never heard of that as a meditation practice before. If it's helpful to you, who am I to say it's not helpful? If that's what you're experiencing. So I feel that's a crucial piece of that, to be as honest and sincere. Not that it should be working, but I'd really like this to be working. But is it working? Is it bringing a good result? That's the key piece to go by. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very good.
Yeah, sorry. I think earlier on in your talk, you said something like feeling your way into your open heart, something like that. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I think in your talk earlier on, you said something like you feel your way into your open heart. Did I get that right? Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. So.
Or opening your heart to the way things are.
Yeah, opening your heart.
Yeah.
So, like everybody else, I spent most of my life in my head, kind of one thought and millions of thoughts and endlessly. Endlessly. But at some point, things happened, and for the first time in my life, I started to trust my own heart, which I thought, just trust your own heart. So. But that's an intermittent thing, So the kind of getting sucked into events or reactivity, then you can easily lose touch with your heart, as it were. So, what was my question? So would you like to say something about the importance of trusting your heart?
Short answer, very. That a number of years ago, Luang Por Sumedho's, he started to change the translation of Sati Sampajanya, which usually would be translated as mindfulness and clear comprehension. Anya is knowledge or knowing, Sampa means comprehensive or complete. So he thought, well, you can be fully mindful of something that you don't comprehend at all. And so he thought that's comprehension, clear comprehension is not a helpful way of describing it. So he started using the term intuitive awareness. And intuition is a sort of deliberately fuzzy term. It's blurry, it's undefined, but it's relating to that sense of the heart's attunement to the time, the place, the situation, a particular experience or event. So he very consciously chose that term to get away from the sort of head-centered, comprehension, and say, because he saw most of life is mysterious. We don't comprehend the larger proportion of the way life is in our experience. We don't know what's happening, we don't know where it comes from, we don't know where it's going. So most of life is mysterious. So better to emphasize that intuitive sense and that open-heartedness of, well, here it is. I can't say exactly what it is or where it comes from or what it might mean, but here it is. And that sort of receptivity and openness, and also drawing upon your intuitive sense, because even if it's rather like in music or in sports, if you ask a musician how exactly do you place your finger on the string, or how do you adjust your breath for the instrument, or how do you interpret the marks on the musical score to get that particular spirit in the music you're playing. And I imagine most musicians would say, I'm not sure. They're not doing it mechanically. It's not like painting by numbers. There's some kind of an attunement. What they're hearing, their fingers kind of know where to go. Or as someone in the sports field, like how exactly did you know how far to lean over before making that maneuver, or exactly how to stretch your leg or move your arm? Like, I don't know. There's an intuitive sense. There's like an intelligence of the body and the living system that the brain can't quite keep up with, and often the brain will get in the way. And I know from my own experience, say if you're leading the chanting, you know the words. You've done it dozens, hundreds of times before. But if you have the thought, oh, what's the next word? almost guaranteed you'll lose your place, or the wrong word will come out. And often it's the trying too hard or using the thinking mind, that gets in the way. But the attunement and just trusting, you know the words, you know the subject, your body knows what to do, and you ask a sports person or an artist, a dancer, how did you make that move? How did you play that? What were you doing? Oh, it's just you let go, and then the system's attunement to the time, the place, the situation does the adjusting. So that seeing how that works over and over again, so it's paying attention and in a sense trusting the awareness, trusting that quality of this being attuned to its environment, being part of its environment, connected completely to its environment, and then from that the appropriate words or actions or movements or the attitudes emerge. If you can use the microphone again.
The words clever and wise, like when I was a kid, oh, he's a clever boy. You'd hear parents talking about a child, clever, wonderful, fantastic. But now we can see what happens when lots of clever people grow up and become powerful. They're very clever, but they cause chaos. But the ones who don't cause chaos are the wise ones, who don't create all kinds of man-made objects or systems, and so they're focusing on something else as a source of happiness, and it's wisdom. And wisdom it's got nothing to do with cleverness and inventing new information technology or whatever, because they can have more negative effects than positive effects. Mm-hmm. Whereas wisdom, that's what's always sort of astounded me ever since I first came across any of all of this. There's this strange thing which doesn't get mentioned very often, certainly not in the mainstream media, but... Oh, sorry, can you hear this?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. But the mainstream media, you never see the word wise and the importance of wise, wisdom. And yet when you actually consider wisdom, it sort of seems to be in your heart and you can trust it. Mm-hmm. That's this...
Yes, indeed. One of T.S. Eliot's poems, he says, I think it's the hollow man. Where is the wisdom that is lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge that is lost in information? So this is the information age rather than the wisdom age. But yeah, I would agree. Wisdom doesn't get a lot of page space, but we're doing our best at Amaravati to counteract that drift, to encourage wisdom in the world. But I see 4 o'clock has come around, so let's call things to a close. Thank you all for your good questions and your good attention. Go well.